I still remember that morning as if it were yesterday. The house was quiet, just the way it had been for years. No laughter, no footsteps running through the hallway, only the soft ticking of the old wall clock. I had grown used to the silence, though deep down, it never really felt like home without her. But 20 years, I lived with one question that never left my heart. Where is she now? My daughter Aisha, the little girl who used to hold my hand so tightly whenever she was afraid of the dark. I could still hear her giggle in my memories, like an echo trapped in time. Life had moved on, or at least, that's what I told everyone. People would say, you have to accept it and live, Salma. But how do you live when a piece of your heart is missing? That morning, I was sitting by the window, mending an old scarf, the same scarf I once made for her when she was 12. The color had faded, but I kept it, a small piece of her I could still touch. The phone on the table rang once, twice, 3 times. I almost didn't answer. These days, most calls were from people selling something I didn't need, but for some reason, I picked it up. A soft voice came through the line. Hello, is this Mrs. Salma? Yes, I said slowly. Who's speaking? There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, shaky, uncertain. Then she whispered, it's me, Mom. Everything around me stopped. The clock, the birds outside, even the air. I pressed the phone closer, afraid that if I blinked, I'd lose her again. My voice trembled. Aisha, my Aisha. She started crying. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have called sooner. I wanted to speak, to tell her I forgave her, that I never stopped loving her, but the words wouldn't come. My throat tightened, and tears blurred my eyes. All I could manage was, you came back to me. You came back. We didn't talk much after that, just small sentences between long silences, but every silence was full of everything we couldn't say. Regret, love, years lost. When the call ended, I just sat there holding the phone, still hearing her voice in my ear. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel alone. That was the day I heard her voice again, the day my world quietly began to breathe once more. It's strange how one day can change the rest of your life. The day Aisha left home, the sky was bright and clear. There was nothing in the air to warn me that my world was about to fall apart. I was in the kitchen making breakfast, parathas and tea, her favorite, when I noticed she hadn't come downstairs yet. At first I thought she was still asleep. She had been quiet for days, keeping to herself, but I thought it was just one of those teenage moods. I didn't know she was carrying a storm inside her heart. When I went to her room, the bed was made, too neatly, the wardrobe door was open, and one of her bags was gone. For a moment, I just stood there, unable to move. My hands began to shake. I ran outside, calling her name, but the street was empty. Just the sound of a distant bicycle bell, and the wind brushing through the trees. I found a note on her desk, just one line, written in her careful handwriting. I need to find my own way. Mom, please don't come looking for me. I remember reading those words again and again, until the ink blurred with my tears. My husband Ahmad tried to stay calm. He said, she come back once she cools down. But days turned into weeks, and she never did. I went to the police station. I asked friends, neighbors. No one had seen her. Some said she might have gone to the city for work. Others whispered that maybe she ran away with someone. I refused to believe any of it. She was my daughter. She wouldn't just disappear like that. But as time passed, hope turned into silence. The house that was once full of her laughter became a place of waiting. I kept her room the same, her books on the shelf, her favorite blue dress hanging in the closet. I couldn't touch anything. It felt like if I did, I would erase what was left of her. People told me to move on, but how could I? Every morning, I made an extra cup of tea out of habit, and every night, I'd look out the window hoping to see her walking down the street. Years later, when my husband passed away, I buried him with a heart heavy not just with grief, but with guilt. Maybe I had been too strict. Maybe I hadn't listened enough. Those thoughts haunted me more than her absence itself. That day, the day she left home, was when time stopped for me. Everything before it feels like another lifetime, a different woman's story. I never imagined 20 years would pass before I'd hear her voice again. But life has a way of circling back to what's unfinished. I just didn't know that our story wasn't over yet. 20 years is a long time to wait, long enough for seasons to blur together, for faces to fade, for memories to soften around the edges. But no matter how many years passed, there was always one space in my heart that never healed. It stayed open, waiting for her. The first few years after Aisha left were the hardest. Every time the phone rang, I hoped it would be her. Every knock on the door made my heart race. I learned to live between hope and heartbreak. Some nights, I'd sit by the window until dawn, imagining where she might be. Was she safe? Was she eating well? Did she ever think of me? I never stopped praying for her. Every morning, after my prayers, I whispered her name. I believed somehow, somewhere, she would feel it. That's what mothers do. We send love across distances we can't measure. People eventually stopped asking about her. At weddings or gatherings, someone would lower their voice and ask, "Any news of your daughter?" And I would smile softly and say, "Not yet." After a while, even those questions stopped. The world moved on, but I stayed still. There were days when I tried to fill the silence. I taught sewing to neighborhood girls, volunteered at the mosque, learned to cook new dishes. But no matter what I did, there was always an empty chair at my table. I never stopped setting 2 plates for breakfast, one for me, one for her. It became a quiet ritual of hope. Sometimes, I'd dream about her. In those dreams, she was still the same, her long hair tied in a braid, her laughter ringing through the house. I'd wake up smiling, then realize it was just a dream. And every time, the ache returned, soft but sharp. There were also moments of anger. Though I rarely spoke of them, I'd ask myself, why didn't she call? Didn't she miss me? But even as I asked, I knew the answer didn't matter. Love doesn't need reasons, it just waits. When I grew older, I started writing letters to her, not to send, just to keep. I wrote about my days, my memories, my regrets. Sometimes I'd seal them in envelopes and place them in a box beside her photo. It made me feel like I was talking to her, even if she couldn't hear me. That box became my companion through the years. A box full of love, pain, and unfinished words. I didn't know that one day, those words would finally reach her. Looking back now, I realized those 20 years were a long silence filled with unspoken love. I didn't just wait for her, I kept her alive inside me. Every prayer, every tear, every memory was a thread connecting us, no matter how far apart we were. It happened on an ordinary morning, the kind that begins quietly, with sunlight slipping through the curtains and the smell of tea on the stove. I had no idea my life was about to change. I had grown used to simple mornings, days that felt the same. Waiting had become a part of me. I didn't hope loudly anymore. I just carried it quietly in my heart. That day, I was watering the small plants on my balcony when the phone rang. I almost ignored it. The number was unfamiliar, and I rarely got calls anymore. But something, a small tug in my chest, made me pick it up. "Hello," I said softly. There was a pause, a long, fragile silence. Then I heard a voice, shaky, careful, almost afraid. "Hello, is this Mrs. Salma?" I answered, "Yes, who's calling?" Then came the words that made the world stop moving. "It's me, Mom." At first, I thought I had misheard. My breath caught in my throat. My hand trembled so badly, I had to hold the edge of the table. That voice, older, deeper, but still hers, I would know it anywhere. I whispered, barely believing it. There was a sound on the other end, a soft sob. The kind that comes from deep inside a person. "Yes, Mom, it's me. I'm sorry. I should have called you sooner." For a moment, neither of us could speak. There was too much between us. 20 years of silence, 20 years of wondering, 20 years of love that never found its way home. When I finally found my voice, it came out, trembling. "You're alive. You're safe." "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm okay now. I didn't know how to face you after everything." I closed my eyes. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I could stop them. "There's nothing to forgive," I whispered. "You're my daughter. That's all that matters." We didn't talk for long, just a few small questions: where she was, how she'd been. But behind every word was something bigger: relief, guilt, love, disbelief. When the call ended, I just sat there, holding the phone like it was a piece of her. I looked around my small living room, the same curtains, the same clock, the same faded photograph of her on the wall, but everything suddenly felt new, alive. Hope had walked back into my house after 20 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her voice in my head, afraid I might forget the sound. I didn't know what came next or what she would say when we met again. All I knew was that my heart, which had been silent for so long, had begun to beat with purpose again. That call, so simple, so unexpected, was the moment life whispered to me, "It's not over yet." 2 days after that call, Aisha told me she was coming home. Even after hearing her voice, a part of me couldn't believe it. 20 years is a long time to live with silence. Sometimes, hope becomes so faint that when it finally returns, you don't know how to hold it. I spent that morning cleaning the house, though it was already clean. I dusted the furniture twice, arranged the cushions, and made her favorite food, lentil soup and rice. Simple, but filled with love. My hands trembled as I stirred the pot. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the door, imagining her standing there like she used to after school, smiling and saying, "Mom, I'm home." But this time, she wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a woman, someone who had lived a life I knew nothing about. I didn't know what she'd been through, what had shaped her, or what kind of person she had become. I just knew she was mine. When the knock finally came, I froze. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it echoing in my ears. I walked slowly to the door, my legs weak beneath me, and there she was. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. She looked different, older, but her eyes, those were the same brown eyes that used to search for me when she was scared, the same eyes that had once sparkled with mischief. "Mom," she said softly, her voice breaking on the word. I reached out, touching her face with trembling fingers, as if I was afraid she'd disappear. "Aisha," I whispered, "you really came back." She nodded, tears falling freely. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to face you after everything I did." I pulled her into my arms before she could say more. For a long time, we just stood there, no words, no explanations, just the mother and daughter trying to fill 20 years of silence with one embrace. I could feel her shaking, crying against my shoulder. And I realized I was crying too. When we finally sat down, everything felt unreal. The room was the same, yet everything had changed. She looked around quietly, noticing the photo frames, the familiar curtains, the little details that hadn't moved since she left. "You kept everything the same," she said softly. "I was waiting for you," I replied. "I didn't want you to come back to an empty house." She smiled through her tears. "It feels like I never left." But we both knew she had. We both knew 20 years couldn't vanish in a single afternoon. Still, in that moment, it didn't matter. She was home. That night, after she went to sleep in her old room, I stood by the door, watching her breathe. Time had taken so much from us, but not everything. It hadn't taken love, and that, I realized, was enough to begin again. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. For a while, I just sat by the kitchen window, listening to the soft breathing coming from her old room. It still felt like a dream to know she was there, under the same roof again. I was afraid that if I closed my eyes for too long, I'd wake up to find it all gone. When Aisha came out later, her hair tied back the way she used to wear it as a girl, I couldn't stop looking at her. She had changed. There were faint lines near her eyes, a quiet heaviness in her smile. Life had written its story on her face, and I realized I didn't know most of it. Over breakfast, she was silent at first, tracing her fingers along the rim of her cup. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "There's something I need to tell you, Mom." I nodded, my heart tightening. I didn't rush her. I just let her take her time. "I was angry when I left," she began. "I thought you didn't understand me. I thought the world outside would be kinder, easier." She paused, her eyes distant. "It wasn't." She told me about those early years, sleeping in a friend's tiny apartment, working long hours at a bakery, skipping meals to save money. "There were nights I cried myself to sleep," she said, "but I was too proud to come home. I kept telling myself I could do it on my own." Then, her voice softened. "But Mom, I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong people. I married a man who wasn't kind. At first, I thought I could change him, but over time, I realized I was losing myself." She looked down, tears glistening in her eyes. "When it got too much, I left him. I started over alone again. And for years, I kept thinking about you. Every birthday, every Eid, every lonely night. I wanted to call, but I was ashamed." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You don't have to be ashamed," I whispered. "You lived, you survived. That's enough." She looked at me, and I saw the little girl she once was, hidden behind all those years of pain. "I thought you'd hate me," she said softly. "Hate you." I smiled through my tears. A mother's heart doesn't know how to hate her child. It only knows how to wait. We sat there quietly for a while. The morning light poured through the window, wrapping us in its warmth. For the first time, I felt like I truly saw her, not the daughter I lost, but the woman she had become. That day, she told me everything she had kept inside for 20 years. And as I listened, I realized something simple yet profound. Love doesn't erase pain, but it gives it meaning. That evening, the house was quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence I had lived with for 20 years. This silence felt gentle, full of unspoken peace, as if the walls themselves were listening, relieved that the sound of love had returned. Aisha and I sat in the living room after dinner. The lamp beside us gave off a soft golden glow, the kind that makes everything look warmer. She was staring at her hands, twisting her fingers the way she used to when she was nervous. I could sense something heavy still resting on her heart. "Mom," she said finally, her voice trembling, "I need to say something." I looked at her and smiled softly. "You've already said so much, my child. You don't owe me anything." But she shook her head. "No, I do. I've carried this inside me for so long. I need to say it." Her eyes met mine, and I saw the tears gathering. "I'm sorry, Mom, for leaving, for the pain I caused, for not calling, for every night you must have cried because of me." Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands. "You didn't deserve that." I felt my own eyes fill with tears. I wanted to tell her that none of that mattered anymore, that the years had already forgiven her, but I waited. I wanted her to let it out. When she looked up again, I reached for her hand. "Aisha," I said softly, "you were young, and the world outside these walls can be cruel. I was young once too, and I made my share of mistakes. You don't need to carry this weight forever." She shook her head gently. "But I hurt you." I smiled through my tears. "And yet here you are sitting beside me, holding my hand. That's what matters. You see, forgiveness isn't something we wait for. It's something we give, quietly, long before the words are spoken." She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder, just like she used to as a child. For a long time, we didn't say anything. There was no need to. The apology had already done its work. It didn't erase the past, but it softened it. Outside, the rain began to fall, tapping gently against the windows. It felt like the world was cleansing itself, just as we were. "I don't deserve you, Mom," she whispered. I kissed the top of her head and said, "Maybe not, but love was never about deserving." That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone for a while, staring at her photo on the shelf. I realized I had been waiting all these years, not for her apology, but for this moment, the quiet knowing that my love had reached her, even across decades of distance. It was then I understood, forgiveness doesn't need to be asked for, and it doesn't need to be given out loud. It just lives, silently, in the spaces where love never stopped. It has been a few months since Aisha came home. Sometimes, when I wake up and hear her moving around the house, it still feels unreal, like a dream I'm afraid to wake from. But then she calls out, "Mom, where's the sugar?" or hums to herself while making tea, and I smile. The sound of her voice has turned this house back into a home. We don't talk much about the years we lost anymore. Those memories sit quietly between us, no longer sharp, no longer heavy. Every now and then, I'll catch her staring at an old photo on the wall, a picture of her as a child, sitting on her father's shoulders. I see sadness flicker in her eyes, but also peace. She's finally home, and that's enough for both of us. I've learned that time doesn't heal everything, but it softens what hurts. It smooths the rough edges of memory until you can touch them without pain. There are still nights when I think of those long years, the unanswered prayers, the waiting, but now, instead of tears, I feel gratitude. Because after all that time, love still found its way back. One evening, as the sun was setting, Aisha and I sat outside on the porch. The air was cool, the sky painted in soft orange light. She rested her head on my shoulder and said quietly, "I wish I had come sooner." I took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You came when you were ready," I said, "and that's all that matters." She smiled, and for a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who would chase butterflies in the garden, laugh without worry, and fall asleep in my arms. I realized then that love never grows old. It just changes shape with time. Later that night, I went to her room to say goodnight. She was already asleep, her face peaceful under the soft glow of the lamp. I stood there watching her, just as I used to when she was a child, and whispered a silent prayer of thanks. That's when I felt it, a quiet stillness in my heart. The years of longing, the sleepless nights, the ache of not knowing, all of it finally settled. I had carried the weight of the past for so long, but that night, I gently set it down. I understood then that forgiveness isn't just for others, it's also for ourselves. I forgave her for leaving, and I forgave myself for not understanding her pain. The past no longer needed my attention. It had served its purpose. Now, when I sit by the window in the mornings, I no longer wait for someone who's gone. I simply watch the light fill the room and think, she's here. And in that quiet truth, I find peace. That was the day I finally let the past rest, and for the first time in 20 years, my heart felt free. When I look back now, I realized life is not about what we lose, but what we find again when we least expect it. For 20 years, I lived with silence, the kind that echoes through every room and every heartbeat. But that silence taught me patience, faith, and the quiet strength of a mother's love. Aisha's return didn't erase the years we lost, but it reminded me that love has its own timing. Sometimes, it takes distance for hearts to find their way back home. I no longer dwell on the pain of yesterday. Instead, I hold on to the peace of today, the sound of her laughter, the warmth of her presence, the gift of one more morning together. In the end, love didn't just bring my daughter home. It brought me home to hope, to forgiveness, and to the kind of peace only love can give.